From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Saini Gray. Ecuador's President Moreno has confirmed that the two kidnapped journalists and their driver from the El Comercio newspaper are dead. He said he had received no word of their fate after his 12-hour deadline expired at around 10 this morning. Moreno also announced that he is sending more troops to the border with Colombia, and he's offering a reward of $100,000 for information leading to the capture of Huacho, the leader of the Colombian group allegedly responsible for kidnapping the three men.
With deep sorrow, I regret to inform you that the 12-hour deadline is over. We have not received proofs of life, and regrettably, we have information that confirms the murder of our compatriots. We have restarted the military operations which were suspended in the area of the border strip, and I have immediately arranged the deployment of elite armed forces units and the national police to that territory.
Mourners have been gathering in Ecuador's capital, Quito, to mark the deaths of the three El Comercio employees. The Plaza Grande has been filled with family members and colleagues since Thursday night as they offered each other support while waiting for news from the authorities. And the Colombian President Juan Manuel Santos has sent his defense minister along with heads of the armed forces and police to Ecuador to coordinate joint operations in the border area. As he arrived in Lima for the VIII Summit, Santos repeated his support for the Ecuadorian people.
I reiterate my condemnation of this deplorable situation in Ecuador. We Colombians are dismayed with what happened with the journalists and the workers at El Comercio newspaper. Yet throughout this whole process, we've been in permanent contact with the President Moreno. Yesterday I spoke to him again, and I reiterated our solidarity and our disposition to support the Ecuadorian government in this situation. Colombia has a vast experience in the fight against these criminal organizations, and we have put at their disposal all of our power and capacities. This morning, I commanded the Minister of Defense, the Armed Forces Commander, the head of the police, to offer all the help that the Ecuadorian government might need. Meanwhile, our solidarity, if it is confirmed what has already been told, of the vile assassination of these Ecuadorian citizens, our solidarity to their families.
The tragedy of the two kidnapped and murdered Ecuadorian journalists and their driver started over 2 weeks ago when they traveled to the northern province of Esmeraldas to report on the violence in that area. The Colombian-Ecuadorian border had suffered a number of attacks since January. On March 26, Javier Ortega, Paul Rivas, and Efrain Segarra were last recorded by the security cameras in their hotel when they were heading to the municipality of Matahe. At some point during their journey, they were kidnapped. On April 1st, following the silence of the Ecuadorian authorities, relatives decided to reveal the identities of their loved one. On Thursday, a supposed dissident group of the FARC, calling itself the Olivier Sinisterra Front, sent a communique announcing the deaths of the team, allegedly during Ecuadorian and Colombian military action. And on Wednesday, the Colombian news media outlet RCN received photos of bodies, apparently those of Javier, Paul, and Efrain. On Thursday, the Ecuadorian President, Moreno, set a 12-hour deadline for the kidnappers to prove that the three victims were still alive. And on Friday, President Moreno confirmed that Javier, Paul, and Efrain were dead. During these last few weeks, numerous vigils and demonstrations have been held to demand the release of the three El Comercio workers and their safe return. Unfortunately, it did not happen. So, what do we know about the three newspaper staff members who were murdered? Well, Paul Rivas was 45 years old. He was a photojournalist who had worked at El Comercio since 1999. He's won multiple awards for his work related to families of the disappeared in Ecuador. Javier Ortega was 32 years old. He was a journalist specializing in human rights violation and corruption. He covered the Colombian peace process and the Odebrecht scandals. And Efrain Segarra was 60 years old. He had worked as a driver at El Comercio for 16 years, and during the 2016 earthquake, he transported journalists to the affected areas. Bolivian President Evo Morales has commented on the murder. President Morales tweeted, "We condemn the murder of the journalist brothers of Ecuador in Colombia. I cannot believe that there are human beings who are enemies of life, capable of killing innocent people. We expect justice, all our solidarity to the Ecuadorian people and to the families of the victims." Venezuela, too, has expressed its sympathy with the people and government of Ecuador. A communique from the government in Caracas expressed condolences and condemned the use of violence for political ends, whatever they may be. The Summit of the Americas has begun in Lima, Peru. It is taking place without the presence of President Moreno from Ecuador and Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. U.S. President Donald Trump is also not attending and has sent his Vice President Mike Pence instead. At the same time, social movements and political organizations are holding their own People's Summit. They say the official government summit is dominated by right-wing leaders trying to pass neoliberal trade policies. The People's Summit is holding a number of events that they say are more inclusive and will deal with issues that matter to the people. And our correspondent in Lima, Jaime Herrera, brings us the latest.
Ahead of the official inauguration of the summit, a conference for businesses has been held in a hotel in Lima. The venue will also host bilateral meetings such as one between Peruvian President Martín Vizcarra and Bolivian President Evo Morales. There's also a meeting scheduled between Canadian President Justin Trudeau and the Colombian one, Juan Manuel Santos. This summit is weakened by the absences of some of the key leaders in the region, in addition to U.S. President Donald Trump's non-attendance, Ecuadorian President Lenín Moreno, who has had to return to his country following the crisis of 3 journalists murdered on the border with Colombia. One of the main criticisms is that the main focus of the summit is governance and the fight against corruption, while many of the heads of governments involved are themselves involved in corruption cases. For instance, former Peruvian President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski, who was the main promoter of the event, had to resign following a corruption charge. On Saturday morning, the leaders will have their first proper meeting. The area is heavily protected by police, and movement in the area is restricted.
We thank Jaime Herrera for that report. Now, ahead of the Americas Summit, Bolivian President Evo Morales participated in the CEO Summit on Friday. He said cooperation between the public and private sectors is key to achieving equality and social justice for society.
The work that you have mentioned of private and public alliances is the right way to develop productive work with social justice to improve the quality of life of our peoples.
Let's go live to Lima and speak to David Comercio. He's from Barbados and is taking part in the summit as a member of the Caribbean Peace Council. David, thank you so much for your time. The official Summit of the Americas is just getting underway. Will it achieve anything?
I doubt it very much. There's no spirit. There's no sense of anything progressive. There's no spirit of solidarity. You cannot have a conference with a theme of using democracy to combat corruption, and you begin by engaging in an egregious, undemocratic and corrupt act. That is the exclusion of the democratically elected president of Venezuela. That's an act that flouts international law principles, and it is an undemocratic act in that it is an act that is designed to delegitimize a democratically elected president. So you're exhibiting a contempt for democracy. So we have a saying in Barbados that if you start wrong, you are bound to end wrong. And I am here in Lima as part of Coalition 27, a civil society coalition that is basically headquartered in Venezuela, and we took part in the civil society segment of the summit. And
so David,
that
let me
segment,
ask you a bit about that. You are actually there for the People's Summit. So talk to me about some of the most important themes and achievement of the Alternative People's Summit that you've been attending.
No. I am here primarily as part of the official summit, but the civil society segment of it. And that segment of it was concluded yesterday. And you know, it almost did not get off the ground because there was such a tremendous protest against the exclusion of Venezuela. There was such a tremendous protest against this disrespect of the principles of national sovereignty and the right to self-determination. You may have heard that particularly the Cuban-based coalition was very vociferous. They were joined by the Venezuelan-based coalition and basically brought proceedings to a halt. However, the civil society representatives did go on to agree on a declaration that one of our representatives would have read out to the official government side of the summit today. So you know, that is my main reason for being in Lima. But I also took the opportunity to participate in some of the activities of the Alternative Summit of the Peoples, which is totally separate from the official Summit of the Americas. So this is a civil society convocation that has been organized by progressive forces from Cuba, Venezuela, Bolivia, and Peru. So these are trade unions, representatives of indigenous people, women, youth organizations. And that process has been much more of the spirit of a summit of the Americas, a spirit of solidarity, a spirit of something progressive happening, because it is rooted in the people. It is a ground up process. Whereas what I attended yesterday, the official Summit of the Americas, there was not even a sense of the Americas, of our culture, our heritage. It was just a dead and depressing event.
Thank you so much, David, for sharing your thoughts of the official summit and some of the events that you participated in of the People's Summit. We've been talking to David Comercio. He's there in Lima, Peru. He's actually from Barbados, and he represents the Caribbean Peace Council. We're going to take a short break now, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. In Venezuela, April 13th is celebrated as the day Hugo Chavez was returned to power after a failed coup d'etat in 2002. To mark the occasion, President Nicolas Maduro held a special commemorative reenactment. Freddie Gillingham reports.
Well, good evening, folks. If you're lucky, you might be able to hear the roar of a Venezuelan fighter jet. A few of them have just flown over our heads as we were just about to start this report. We have spent most of the day at the military parade in downtown Caracas, where the Venezuelan military are honoring the 9th anniversary of the Bolivarian National Militia. This was expanded back in 2017 to around 500,000 new militiamen and women. This was on the orders of President Nicolas Maduro as a result of the Constituent Assembly. It comes obviously at a very sensitive time, hence why this military parade is so symbolic. Various leaders, key leaders from key countries that are vehemently opposed against Venezuela are meeting in Lima, Peru for the Summit of Americas. Donald Trump won't be there, but Marco Rubio and Mike Pence, Marco Rubio particularly hostile to Venezuela, they will be meeting to what we think will be discussing various measures where they will be taking a harder line against Venezuela. Nicolas Maduro was present today speaking at the military parade. He decided not to go to that Summit of Americas because he wanted to spend his time with the Venezuelan people, and that's what he was doing today in Caracas.
Thank you for that report, Freddie. Freddie reporting there from Caracas. In Dominica, Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit has sworn in 2 new cabinet members, one of whom is a former member of the opposition United Workers' Party, Joseph Isaacs. Isaacs, the MP for Roseau Central, recently resigned from the Workers' Party, declaring himself an independent. However, now it appears he's crossed the aisle, as he's been named the Minister for the Environment, Climate Resilience, Disaster Management and Urban Renewal. Isaacs says, however, while he has joined the cabinet, he has not joined the governing Dominica Labour Party.
And I told the Prime Minister privately, so I can say it. I told him what I'm doing is sacrificing myself for country. But I'm doing it because I put full trust and confidence in him. And he said, "Comrade, I have your back."
Prime Minister Skerrit explained his decision by saying, in 2015, after Hurricane Erika, he invited all 21 members of parliament at the time into his cabinet to better facilitate the reconstruction of Dominica. In adding Joseph Isaacs to his cabinet, he's repeating the decision he says was done in Dominica's best interest, especially as it's still recovering from 2017's Hurricane Maria.
When Maria came, Mr. Isaac, Honorable Isaac, came to me. I did not send to call him. And he came to me, to my office, to see me. And I saw him. And he said, "Prime Minister, I am here to offer my service to Dominica. In whatever way you think I can make a contribution, I am available, because we need to work together to respond to this disaster."
Trinidad and Tobago is gaining international recognition for its landmark ruling, which called a law outlawing buggery unconstitutional. The government says they will appeal the ruling all the way to the Privy Council, which means it could be months or even years before it is fully struck from the law books. The challenge was brought by the activist Jason Jones, who says he pursued this case at great personal cost. But after Thursday's landmark decision, he says the fight for equality throughout the Caribbean continues.
Well, I think what is interesting that there was so many threats of violence at the launch of this challenge, and it seems to be petering off. I think those loud voices are starting to be silenced, and the judgment yesterday obviously will silence them even further. There's a lot of advocacy that needs to go alongside of this legal challenge, and I'm hoping that activists from both Trinidad and the region can come together, start working more cohesively as an advocacy group.
And Uruguay is hosting Trans Art Week, a cultural event aimed at raising the visibility of the trans community.
Despite living in one of the most progressive and open countries with LGBT rights, Uruguayan trans people still face many challenges. Art is the medium of choice that they choose to spread their struggle.
There was this need of using art as a political tool to transform our society and, above all, to raise the question on why there are no artistic representations by trans artists in mainstream culture.
Trans Art Week is made up of different events, including music concerts, trans fashion and design workshops, photo exhibitions, and talks with leaders of the Uruguayan LGBT community.
Of course, there has been a change in society. Part of it supports visibility and inclusion, but at the same time, we can see that another part of the population fights against it, trying to make us less visible and erase all the rights we have obtained so far. And despite actually obtaining many important rights, we still lack a comprehensive law that protects the trans community.
That law is currently being discussed by the Uruguayan Congress. The bill includes the acknowledgement that trans people have historically been discriminated and have been victims of violence, even by the state, which not only didn't recognize their identity, but also prosecuted them.
Not only during the dictatorship, but also after. Until the 2000s, trans people in Uruguay have been repressed and tortured. Discrimination was ongoing even 20 years after the return of democracy. Another main point is the importance of recognizing our right to education, our cultural rights, and the right to work inclusion.
According to the first census of trans people in Uruguay, there are more than 900 people identifying as transgender in the country, and they still represent one of the most vulnerable groups in the Uruguayan society. Their life expectancy is 35 years, and only 17.6% are expected to live past 50.
We take a short break now, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. In Palestine, at least 700 people have been injured as demonstrators gathered for a third week on the border fence between Gaza and Israel. Our correspondent in Gaza, Noor Harazin, has the details.
Thousands of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip assembled at the Israeli border for the third week of protests on Friday of burning the Israeli flag. Israeli troops injured 700 people, including 17 medical workers and journalists, mainly by tear gas and live bullets. Health officials in Gaza said at least one Palestinian was in critical condition after being shot in the head east of Gaza City. As in the last 2 weeks, the demonstrators gathered in 5 different protest sites near the border fence. In some areas, several Israeli flags along with tires were burned in front of the Israeli soldiers on the other side. 2 flagpoles were erected at the protest camp in eastern Gaza City, where 2 giant Palestinian flags were raised.
Masses of Palestinians have streamed toward the Israeli border for the third consecutive Friday to tell the whole world that we, the people of Palestine, do have the right to return to our homes, that we were forced to leave in 1948. Our message to the world that we are an active people who will never forget their lands.
In total, 33 Palestinians have been killed and thousands wounded by fire of the Israeli occupation forces since the residents of Gaza began the Great March of Return on March 30th to demand the right to return to their pre-1948 homes. The planned 6 weeks protest is expected to reach its climax on May 15th, the 17th anniversary of the Palestinian Nakba catastrophe, when over 700,000 Palestinians were forcibly displaced from their homes since Israel's inception in 1948.
The Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, has expressed concerns over escalating international tension over Syria. The United Nations Security Council held an emergency meeting at the request of Russia, which is seeking support for its calls on the United States and its allies to refrain from launching a military strike. Guterres said a situation similar to the Cold War has been brewing.
Syria indeed today represents the most serious threat to international peace and security. In Syria, we see confrontations and proxy wars involving several national armies, a number of armed opposition groups, many national and international militia, foreign fighters from everywhere in the world, and various terrorist organizations.
We continue to observe dangerous military preparations for an illegal act of force against a sovereign state. The sole thing that they have an interest in is to oust the Syrian government and to deter, contain the Russian Federation.
In Britain, protesters have presented a letter to Prime Minister Theresa May, urging her to refrain from joining Donald Trump in escalating a war in Syria. The anti-war protesters blocked the street outside the Prime Minister's residence on Downing Street. The letter, signed by a number of politicians, celebrities, academics, and trade unionists, said that further military intervention, as proposed by Trump, May, and Macron, is not the solution. And finally, in Australia, a turtle enthusiast's 20-year-long search had a happy ending when he finally spotted the Mary River turtle. The turtle, which was found on the east coast of Australia, is affectionately known as the punk turtle due to the green algae that grows on its head. The turtle also has the amazing ability to breathe through its genitals. It was once a popular pet in Australia, but is now one of the world's most endangered reptiles. And we've come to the end of this news brief, but for these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Sony Gray. Thank you so much for watching.